Emily Davis had always been the epitome of a perfect housewife in the quiet suburban community of Oak Ridge, Texas. At 38 years old, she had mastered the art of maintaining a pristine home, organizing social events, and playing the role of the devoted wife and mother. Her days were a series of routine tasks: grocery shopping, attending PTA meetings, and preparing meals. From the outside, her life appeared idyllic. Her house was always immaculately clean, her garden well tended, and her daughter, Lily, was a model student. Yet, beneath this veneer of perfection, Emily's life was far from fulfilling. Emily had been married to David for 15 years. David, 42, worked as an engineer and was known for his commitment to his job, often working late into the evenings. His long hours at the office left him physically present, but emotionally distant from his family. David's focus on his career had created a chasm between him and Emily, a distance that grew more pronounced as time went on. While he was not unkind or neglectful by nature, his absence at home left Emily feeling isolated and unappreciated. Their conversations had dwindled to brief exchanges about household matters, and the emotional connection they once shared had faded. Their daughter, Lily, was a bright and promising 15-year-old who excelled in school and had a close group of friends. While Lily's achievements were a source of pride for both parents, her busy schedule and social life often meant she was absent from the family dynamic, further isolating Emily. The quiet evenings alone, with only the hum of the refrigerator and the flicker of the television for company, underscored Emily's loneliness. The arrival of Alex Fisher, the 18-year-old son of the Davis family's next-door neighbors, was a catalyst for change. Alex had recently graduated high school and decided to take a gap year before pursuing college. His decision to work and help out neighbors for extra cash led him to offer his assistance around the neighborhood. With his athletic build, charming smile, and genuine demeanor, Alex quickly became a welcome presence in Emily's life. His offers to help with odd jobs around the house were initially a small convenience, but they soon became something much more significant. Emily first noticed Alex while he was mowing the lawn at his home. He greeted her with a friendly wave, and their brief exchanges during those early encounters were marked by a warmth and ease that Emily found refreshing. As the days passed, Alex began stopping by more frequently, offering to assist with tasks such as fixing the garden fence or carrying groceries. Emily appreciated his willingness to help, but more importantly, she found herself looking forward to his visits. His attention and interest in her well-being provided a stark contrast to the emotional detachment she felt from David. One sunny afternoon, while David was working late, Emily found herself alone in the kitchen preparing dinner. Alex had come over to help with a leaky faucet, and as they worked together, their conversation flowed easily. Emily felt a flutter of excitement as Alex complimented her on her cooking and engaged her in lively conversation about her interests. It was a simple moment, but it was enough to spark a sense of connection that Emily had been yearning for. As days turned into weeks, Alex's presence became a source of comfort and joy for Emily. Their interactions grew more personal, and the emotional void in her life began to fill with his company. The affection she felt for Alex was not just about physical attraction. It was about the emotional connection and validation she had been missing for so long. The way Alex looked at her, listened to her, and made her feel valued was a stark contrast to the apathy she had grown accustomed to from David. However, this newfound connection came with its own set of complications. Emily knew that her growing affection for Alex was crossing boundaries that should not be crossed. The guilt and anxiety of hiding their interactions weighed heavily on her, but the emotional relief she experienced with Alex was intoxicating. She began to rationalize their relationship, convincing herself that it was harmless and that she deserved to feel appreciated and desired. One evening, Alex stayed late to help Emily with some cleaning after dinner. The casual atmosphere in the kitchen gave way to a more intimate setting, and before long, their conversation turned to more personal matters. The boundary between friendly assistance and emotional intimacy blurred, and the connection they had been building culminated in a moment of forbidden passion. The spark that ignited between them was undeniable, and their clandestine affair began. The initial thrill of their secret meetings was exhilarating, but it also brought with it a heavy burden of secrecy and guilt. Emily's interactions with Alex became a dangerous game of hiding and deception. She started to make excuses for her absences from home, avoiding David's questions with half-truths and evasion. Alex, too, felt the weight of their affair and the fear of being discovered. Their stolen moments together became a refuge from the dissatisfaction and monotony of their daily lives. But they also signaled the beginning of a perilous journey. As their relationship deepened, so did the risks of getting caught. Emily's attempts to maintain normalcy at home while pursuing her secret affair created a tension that was palpable. The facade of a perfect life was beginning to crack, and the emotional stakes were rising. The connection that had started as a simple comfort had evolved into a complex web of deceit and longing, setting the stage for a dramatic and tumultuous series of events that would ultimately shatter the illusion of perfection Emily had carefully crafted. With each passing day, the weight of their secret grew heavier, and the consequences of their actions became increasingly unavoidable. The seemingly perfect life that Emily had once taken for granted was on the verge of unraveling, and the catalyst of Alex's presence had set in motion a chain of events that would lead to unforeseen and dramatic repercussions. As the weeks passed, Emily and Alex's secret affair became more intense, and the consequences of their actions began to take shape. Their once innocent interactions had evolved into clandestine meetings filled with a charged intensity. They both felt the thrill of their forbidden relationship, but it came with mounting anxiety and the constant fear of discovery. Their secret rendezvous were carefully orchestrated. Emily would concoct elaborate excuses to leave the house, often claiming she needed to run errands or attend late meetings. Alex, on the other hand, would time his visits to coincide with these absences, ensuring that no one saw them together. Their stolen moments were spent in hushed whispers and hurried embraces, trying to savor what little time they had before Emily had to return to her family responsibilities. One evening, Emily decided to host a small gathering at their home to maintain the facade of normalcy. As she prepared for the event, Alex arrived early to help her set up. The tension between them was palpable as they worked together in the kitchen, their conversation interspersed with flirtatious glances and touches that left them both breathless. Their interaction was a stark contrast to the cheerful atmosphere Emily was trying to create for her guests. As the evening progressed, the doorbell rang, and David arrived home with a few colleagues from work. Emily's heart raced as she realized she had to navigate the party while keeping her secret rendezvous with Alex hidden. The guests were lively, and David's attention was focused on entertaining them, which allowed Emily and Alex to steal away to the basement for a brief interlude. Their time alone was interrupted when Emily's phone buzzed with a text message from Lily, asking where she was. Panic surged through Emily as she read the message, realizing that Lily had come home early and was looking for her. Alex, sensing her anxiety, hurriedly left through the basement door, disappearing into the night before Emily could compose herself. The near miss with Lily heightened Emily's paranoia. She became increasingly jittery, constantly on edge about the possibility of being caught. Her attempts to reassure Alex were met with his own growing concerns. Alex's friend, Tom, who had always been a source of trouble, began to press him for favors, threatening to expose their affair if Alex did not cooperate. This threat added another layer of stress and fear to their already precarious situation. The strain on their relationship began to manifest in irrational behavior. Emily, feeling the weight of her deception, started to lash out at David over minor issues. Her anger was not just directed at him, but also at the guilt and frustration she felt about her own actions. David, perplexed by her sudden mood swings and evasive behavior, grew increasingly suspicious. He had noticed her frequent absences and late-night phone calls, and his growing concern led him to hire a private investigator to follow her movements. One Friday night, David's suspicions reached a breaking point. He returned home early from work, determined to catch Emily in one of her lies. Emily, unaware of David's plan, had arranged a secret meeting with Alex at their home, while David was supposedly out of town. David, however, had not left, and instead, he waited in the shadows, watching as Alex arrived at the house. Emily and Alex's meeting was passionate and intense, but it was also filled with an underlying tension. They had planned to spend a quiet evening together, but Emily's anxiety made the atmosphere fraught. Every sound seemed amplified, and every shadow seemed threatening. Their affair had reached a point where the fear of discovery overshadowed their moments of intimacy. As David watched from his hiding spot, he saw Alex enter the house and saw Emily greet him with a mixture of relief and apprehension. The sight of them together confirmed his worst fears and filled him with a sense of betrayal and rage. He watched as they descended into the basement, their whispers and laughter barely audible through the walls. Unable to contain his anger, David made his way to the basement, determined to confront them. He was met with the sight of Emily and Alex in a heated embrace. David's presence was unexpected, and the confrontation was explosive. The three of them stood in a charged silence, the air thick with the weight of unspoken accusations and raw emotions. Emily tried to explain, but her words were drowned out by David's angry outburst. Alex, feeling cornered and desperate, tried to defuse the situation, but his attempts only fueled David's fury. The confrontation quickly escalated into a physical altercation, with David's rage and Alex's fear creating a volatile mix. Emily, caught between the two men, felt an overwhelming sense of dread as the situation spiraled out of control. During the confrontation, Alex's fear and panic led him to act irrationally. He pushed David in an attempt to escape, but the force of the shove caused David to lose his balance and fall against the sharp edge of a metal shelf. The impact was brutal, and David lay motionless on the ground, blood pooling around him. The room fell into a stunned silence as the gravity of the situation sank in. Emily was paralyzed with shock and horror. The sight of David's lifeless body was a nightmare come true. Alex, equally horrified, tried to tend to David's wounds, but it was too late. The accident had resulted in David's death, and the reality of their situation hit them with crushing force. In the aftermath of the confrontation, Emily and Alex were consumed by panic. They knew they had to act quickly to cover up the incident. Emily's mind raced as she tried to think of a plausible explanation for David's death. She cleaned up the blood and attempted to stage the scene as an unfortunate accident, but her efforts were frantic and disorganized. The next morning, David's body was discovered by a neighbor who had come to check on him. The police were called, and an investigation was launched into the circumstances surrounding his death. Emily and Alex's frantic attempts to cover their tracks were soon scrutinized, and the suspicion of foul play began to loom over them. As the investigation progressed, the truth about Emily and Alex's affair began to emerge. The clues left behind, combined with the testimonies from neighbors and the private investigators' observations, painted a damning picture of their involvement. Emily's desperate attempts to maintain her innocence only deepened the investigators' suspicions. The once hidden affair and the ensuing murder had shattered the illusion of Emily's perfect life. The descent into chaos had begun, setting the stage for a dramatic unraveling of secrets and the inevitable confrontation with the consequences of their actions. The tension between Emily and Alex, their mounting fear of discovery, and the fatal outcome of their confrontation with David had set in motion a chain of events that would forever alter their lives. The tension in the Davis household had reached a boiling point. Emily Davis and Alex Fisher were tangled in a web of secrecy and deception that was becoming increasingly difficult to maintain. Their affair, which had once been a source of fleeting joy, had now become a dangerous and all-consuming liability. The incident that had transpired in the basement marked the climax of their unraveling lives. It was late in the evening when David Davis unexpectedly arrived home early from work. Emily and Alex had planned another clandestine meeting, hoping to find solace in each other's company away from the prying eyes of the world. David's unexpected arrival shattered their carefully laid plans and set the stage for a confrontation that would have tragic consequences. Emily had been preparing a late dinner when she heard the sound of David's car pulling into the driveway. Panic surged through her, and she quickly tried to signal Alex to leave through the basement door. But it was too late. David had already entered the house and was making his way toward the kitchen. Emily's heart pounded as she faced the imminent danger of being discovered. David's footsteps grew louder, and Emily, desperate to protect their secret, met him in the kitchen with a forced smile. David, sensing something was amiss, stared at her with growing suspicion. Emily tried to act normally, but her unease was evident. David's eyes, cold and hard, reflected his mounting frustration and distrust. Without warning, Alex, who had been hiding in the basement, heard the commotion and decided to investigate. He emerged cautiously, his face pale and eyes wide with fear. As he entered the kitchen, the tension exploded into a confrontation. David's anger boiled over as he recognized Alex, and he confronted him with a mixture of shock and rage. "What are you doing here?" David demanded, his voice trembling with a mix of accusation and disbelief. Emily, feeling the weight of her actions, tried to intervene. "David, please calm down. It's not what you think." But David was beyond reason. His anger surged as he took a menacing step toward Alex. "You've been lying to me, Emily. You've been seeing him behind my back." Alex, panicking, tried to explain himself, but his words were drowned out by David's furious shouting. Emily, caught between the two men, felt her heart racing. The atmosphere in the kitchen was charged with a dangerous energy as David's anger and Alex's fear created a volatile mix. The confrontation quickly escalated into a physical altercation. David, driven by his rage, attempted to grab Alex, but Alex, in a state of pure panic, pushed David away. The force of the shove caused David to lose his balance, and he stumbled backward, crashing into a metal shelf. The shelf was precariously positioned, and the sharp edge struck David's head with brutal force. The sound of David hitting the ground was sickening. Emily screamed as she rushed to David's side, her hands shaking uncontrollably. Alex, horrified, tried to help, but the damage was already done. David lay motionless on the floor, a pool of blood spreading around him. The gravity of the situation hit both Emily and Alex with crushing force. Emily's immediate reaction was one of shock and despair. She knelt beside David, her hands drenched in blood, tears streaming down her face. The man she had once loved was now dead because of a moment of uncontrolled anger and desperation. Alex stood frozen, his face pale and his eyes wide with terror. In a frantic attempt to cover up the incident, Emily quickly made a series of desperate decisions. She ordered Alex to leave through the back door and instructed him to stay away until she had figured out what to do. As Alex fled into the night, Emily began to clean up the scene, her movements frantic and disjointed. She wiped away the blood and tried to arrange David's body to make the scene appear as though it had been an accident. The next morning, a neighbor, worried about the commotion, called the police when they found David's body. The arrival of law enforcement brought a new wave of fear and anxiety for Emily. She had to maintain her composure as the police investigated the scene. The officers questioned her about the circumstances surrounding David's death, but Emily's rehearsed explanations and forced calmness did little to convince them. As the investigation unfolded, the police began to piece together the puzzle of David's death. Witnesses reported seeing Alex leaving the Davis residence late at night, and the private investigator David had hired before his death had gathered evidence of Emily's unusual behavior. The investigators found traces of blood that led them to question Emily about the events of that night. The mounting evidence and inconsistencies in Emily's statements raised suspicions. The tension in the courtroom was palpable as Emily and Alex, faced the legal consequences of their actions. The trial revealed the sordid details of their affair and the chain of events that led to David's death. Emily's attempts to portray David's death as a tragic accident were undermined by the evidence and the testimony of those who had witnessed her interactions with Alex. Alex, who had initially fled in a panic, was eventually apprehended. His testimony, coupled with the evidence of his presence at the scene, painted a damning picture of their involvement in David's death. The courtroom drama was filled with emotional testimonies, and the impact of their actions on David's family was a central theme in the trial. In the end, Emily was convicted of manslaughter, and Alex faced charges related to his role in the cover-up. The court found that their affair and the resulting confrontation had led to an accidental but preventable death. The verdict brought a sense of closure to the case, but it also highlighted the devastating consequences of their actions. Emily was sentenced to a lengthy prison term, and Alex received a reduced sentence due to his cooperation with the investigation. The trial had exposed the depth of their deception and the tragic outcome of their choices. The once idyllic life Emily had lived was irreparably shattered, and the consequences of their forbidden relationship were a stark reminder of the fragile nature of trust and the destructive power of hidden desires. In the aftermath of the trial, Emily's life was forever altered. She was left to reflect on the choices that had led to such a tragic outcome, and the weight of her actions hung heavy over her.